In today's farm report, with tighter crop budgets, it's more important than ever to make sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck. Dan Martins with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some information on how to do that on the production side.
There's been a fair amount of discussion about tighter crop production budgets this year, so it seems good to give some thought to where we spend $1 on inputs and can expect to get more than $1 back. Extension Soils fertility specialist Dan Kaiser gave a presentation at an Ag Research Update in Wilmer back in January titled Making Fertilizer Decisions in Years with Low Commodity Prices. This is probably equally important when crop prices are better too, because building some financial reserves when markets are better is one of the keys to working through the times when markets are not so good. Kaiser offered some discussion on fertilizer priorities. For corn, of course, he listed nitrogen first. Corn is most responsive to nitrogen as a nutrient, so accounting for having adequate nitrogen counts first. This includes getting a handle on nitrogen credits from a past legume crop like soybeans or alfalfa, from manure, and from irrigation water in some cases. Incorporating manure as soon after application as possible is a key to making the best use of nitrogen from the manure. Incorporation also mixes other manure nutrients into the soil, where they are less likely to wash off the surface with snowmelt or heavy rains. And then it's important to follow practices that reduce soil erosion. Next, Kaiser talked about phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur, and then zinc as a micronutrient that can be important for corn. Phosphorus, potassium, and zinc needs can be determined from soil testing. Sulfur needs are evaluated based on organic matter content of the soil, and crop rotation might be a factor. Kaiser said the phosphorus and potassium decisions are not as easy as we sometimes portray them to be. There can be more P and K in soil reserves than what is represented by soil tests. This means we see significant variations sometimes in whether we see a crop response to phosphorus and potassium fertilizer when soil tests indicate that we should. Kaiser showed results of field trials where there was about a 100% chance of seeing an economic response to phosphorus fertilizer for corn when the soil tested in a very low range based on the Brave phosphorus test, a 72% chance in the low range, only about a 25% chance in the medium range, a 10% chance in the high range, and a 5% chance in the very high range. The response to phosphorus fertilizer for soybeans is less predictable at low phosphorus levels, about the same in the middle range, and a little better at higher soil phosphorus levels. I think some of this points to the reality that there is a margin of error or variability with almost everything we do, and we maybe don't talk about that as much as we should. Again, it can be good to know whether we have a high or low chance of getting return on a dollar spent. And it's good to have research going on to study the factors that might drive some of the variations. So hopefully we can make decisions more accurately based on soil, weather, or other factors to make better use of financial and other resources. I'm Dan Martins with U of M Extension, and I hope you're doing well with the things you're working toward today.
A bit of a surprise for some analysts in Friday's USDA Hogs and Pigs report. Many had expected farrowings to continue at a higher level over the rest of the year.
Obviously, the report is showing a different direction.
Agriculture Department livestock analyst Shale Shagami says the hog and pig inventory is up 7% from this time a year ago. Market hogs up 8%. Pig crop in the December through February quarter up 9%. But take a look at farrowing intentions. A few months ago, hog producers said that during this spring quarter, they intended to farrow up to 3.5% more hogs than the year before. Now, they're planning only a 2% increase. And for the summer quarter, intended farrowings are down 2% from a year earlier. Now, yes, hogs were bringing high prices for most of last year, but now
we've actually seen returns for producers go negative with the very sharp declines that we've seen in hog prices. So again, despite the fact that we're looking at relatively cheap feed prices, producers are looking at that sharp decline in hog prices and scaling back their production plans moving forward.
Hog prices down from an average $76 a hundredweight last year down to about $46 currently. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Last June, the USDA made it a mandatory reporting for the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, also known as PEDV, which is affecting millions of pigs. Rod Bain with the U.S. Department of Agriculture has more.
This time last year, the hog industry was greatly concerned about porcine epidemic diarrhea virus and its impacts on litter populations. But as Liz Wagstrom of the National Pork Producers Council points out,
there's a real change in the numbers that we had last year versus this year.
A change for the better, as Wagstrom explained at the recent USDA Agricultural Outlook Forum. and part of the credit goes to a USDA order last summer.
On June 5th last year, Secretary Vilsack issued a federal order making porcine epidemic diarrhea virus and porcine delta coronavirus reportable diseases. And they're considered, we now call them SCCD, which is swine enteric coronavirus diseases. So that means that the numbers we had before June 5th are not necessarily directly comparable to the numbers we have after June 5th.
So for the winter months of 2013 and 14, around 250 to 300 new cases of PED virus were reported weekly. After the federal reporting order came out in June,
our number of accessions, the actual number of submissions going into the laboratory every week, stayed pretty similar. And we've had very steady numbers of positive cases. Right now, it's looking at somewhere around 100.
Around 100 new cases per week. Wagstrom says one reason for the reduced numbers is reporting of premise identification numbers as part of case reporting, part of the regulations for funding under the program as managed by USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service.
So you're not going to get reimbursed for that laboratory testing unless you have your premises ID number on the veterinary laboratory submission.
She adds various control strategies, ranging from biosecurity improvements on swine operations to herd closures and vaccines in specific cases, have also helped reduce PED cases.
I think we have had some effectiveness with our control strategies. The other thing is I believe we're probably testing more samples than we were, largely in parts because of the APHIS diagnostic funding, and in part because we now have a number of veterinarians and producers who are sending in repeated samples from farms that they are trying to prove are negative.
Wagstrom adds that the pork industry hopes to meet with USDA officials to review the value of the federal order and discuss how it can be improved before it is published as a final rule. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. Crop producers received more on a whole for their goods, while livestock producers on average saw lower prices received. And the sum of the latest USDA agricultural prices report shows farmers and ranchers receiving 3% more for their products than the previous month. The prices received index for crop production was up 2.4% month to month, despite lower prices for most crop categories. However, feed grain producers received the same price as they did the prior month, and producers received higher prices for tomatoes, oranges, and hay. Meanwhile, livestock producers received 4.2% lower prices in the latest index. That was due to lower prices in all categories, with meat, animal, and dairy products reporting around 4.5% lower prices in their respective indexes. And the February index for prices paid for inputs and services remained unchanged from the previous month. Higher prices for items such as herbicides and LP gas offset lower prices for feeder cattle, complete feeds, and diesel. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.